Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from room V543. In this video, we want to explain about listening comprehension. First of all, let me introduce our member. The first is Catherine, Derta, Rani, Sania, and Siti. The first speaker will be presented by Sania.
In approach, there are two factors, message factors and medium factors, and I'm going to explain about message factors. There are three related levels of discourse processing appear to be involved in listening. The first one is proportional identification, the second one is interpretation of illocutionary force, and then the last one is activation of real-world knowledge. The central question from both a theoretical and pedagogical perspective concerns the nature of the units listeners make use of in understanding language. But propositions are represented indirectly in the survey structure of utterance. Listeners make use of two kinds of knowledge to identify propositions: knowledge of the syntax of the target language and real-world knowledge. Syntactic knowledge enables the listener to chunk incoming discourse into segments or constituents. But knowledge of the world is also used to help identify propositions, enabling listeners to sometimes bypass the constituent identification process. Hence, below is understood as because in real life, this is a plausible reconstruction of likely events involving cats and rats. First is rat, cat it chased ate the, and the second, the cat chased the rat and ate it. The following processes therefore appear to be involved in comprehension. The first one is the listener takes in raw speech and holds an image of it in short-term memory. The second one is an attempt is made to organize when was heard in constituent identifying their content and function. The propositional meaning of sentence is retained and not the actual word or grammatical devices that we were used to express it. Thus, after hearing Tom say that the car has been fixed and could be picked up at 5, the listener is likely to remember only that the car is now ready to be picked up and not whether the speaker said the car is fixed rather than the car has been fixed, or could be picked up rather than will be ready to be picked up. Memory works with propositions, not with sentences. We were able to understand many utterances from our general awareness of how people achieve goals and from our assumption that most human behavior is purposeful and directed toward particular ends. Non-native speakers, however, may lack many culturally specific script. Their individual script may differ in degree and content from target language script, and this poses additional problems for the non-native listener.
The second one is medium factors. The preceding discussion has focused on how meanings are understood in listening, but listener confront another dimension of comprehension when processing speech. Causal basis of speech. Whereas the unit of organization of written discourse is the sentence. Spoken language is generally delivered one clause at a time. Reduced forms. In articulating clauses, speakers are guided by the need to express meanings efficiently. This means that words that play a less crucial role in the message may be slurred or dropped, and other words given more prominence. Ungrammatical forms. Because of the effort speakers put into planning and organism the content of their utterance in ongoing time, grammaticality is often less relevant than ideational coherence. Pausing and speech error. An important component of human speech consists of the pauses, hesitation, false starts, and correction that make up such a large portion of what we actually say. Rate of delivery. Pausing also affects our perception of the pace of speech. The impression of faster or slower speech generally results from the amount of intraclausal pausing that speakers use. Rhythm and stress. The rhythmic pattern of spoken English is another of its distinctive features. In many languages, the length of time required to pronounce an utterance depends upon the number of syllables it contains, since syllables are of about equal length. Cohesive device. Speech shares with written discourse the mechanism for marking grammatical ties within and between sentences, but many function differently in spoken discourse. Information content. Since conversation involves both a speaker and hearer, meanings are constructed cooperatively. A particular speaker does not say everything he or she wants to say in a single burst. Interactive. Conversation is interactive. The listener's presence is indicated by gesture, movement, gaze, and facial expression.
And the next slide is design. The factor we have just reviewed indicate some of the central processes of listening comprehension and ways in which spoken discourse differs from written text. The design phase in curriculum development consists of assessment of learner needs, isolation of microskills, diagnostic testing, and formulating of instructional. Assessment of learners' needs. This refers to procedures aimed at identifying the type of listening skill the learner requires according to situation and purposes the listener will encounter. Isolation of microskills. From the information obtained from needs analysis and from an analysis of the features of the target language discourse that the learner will encounter, particular listening skills are isolated that correspond to the listening abilities the learner requires. The product of this operation is a skill taxonomy. And diagnostic testing. From proficiency or diagnostic testing, a profile is established of the learner's present listening abilities. Particular microskills from the skill taxonomy are then selected. And the last is formulation of instructional objectives. Using information from diagnostic or proficiency testing, instructional objectives for a listening comprehension program can be developed. These procedures are essential before instructional activities can be selected or developed.
Next is procedure. In procedure, there are two materials. The first is criteria for evaluating activities and exercise, and I will explain about criteria for evaluating activities. The first is content validity. Many listening material contain activities that depend more on reading or general intelligence than on the listening skill. The question of content validity raises the issue of whether the activity adequately or actually makes use of skill and behavior that are part of listening in the real world. Second, listening comprehension or memory. An exercise involving listening to a passage and responding to true-false question about the content of it typically make use of memory rather than comprehension. Third is purposefulness and transferabilities. An activities that makes use of news broadcast as input. For example, should be reflect the reason why people typically listening to the news broadcast, such as listening for information about event. Close exercise require the learner to supply grammatical word after listening to the news item do not reflect the purpose for which people listening to the news broadcast. 4 is testing or teaching. A great many listening activities test rather than teach. For example, a set of true-false questions following a passage on tape might indicate how much of the material learner can remember. But this kind of activities in no way help the learner develop the ability to grasp many ideas or extract relevant details. An activity that teach rather than the test many require much use of pre-listening text and text complete as student listening than post-listening text. The last is authenticity. Although many authentic discourse may be too disfluent or difficult to understand without contextual support, materials should aim for relative authenticity if they are to prepare listeners for real listening situation. Many current commercial listening material are spoken at an artificially slow pace in prestige dialect that are not typically of the ordinary speech.
Exercise types. In developing classroom materials and activity, we can manipulate the input or the text. Input, for example, may be in the form of dialogue or monologue. Dialogue may be scripted or unscripted. Between native speakers, between native and non-native speakers, or between non-native speakers. Difficulty in both dialogue and monologue may vary according to the rate of delivery, level of vocabulary, topic, information content, fluency, amount of pausing, errors, and coherence. First, matching or distinguishing. Choosing a response in written or pictorial form that correspond with what was heard. Example, placing picture in a sequence that matches a story or set of events. Choosing a picture to match a situation, such as listening to a radio advertisement and finding the product from a set of pictures. Second, transferring. Exercises of this type involve receiving information in one form and transferring the information or part of it into another form. For example, listening to a discussion about a house and then sketching the house. The third, transcribing. Listening and then writing down what was heard. Dictation is the most common example of this activity. Scanning, exercise in which listener must extract selected items by scanning the input in order to find a specific piece of information. For example, listening to a news broadcast and identifying the name of the winning party in an election. Extending, exercises that involve going beyond what is provided, such as reconstruction, a dialogue when alternate lines are missing or providing a conclusion to a story. Condensing, reducing what is heard to an outline of main points such as is required in taking notes. Answering question from the input. Different kinds of question will focus focus on different levels of listening. For example, questions that require recall of details, those that require inferences and deduction, those that require evaluation or reaction. The last one, predicting. Guessing or predicting outcomes, causes, relationship, and so forth based on information presented in a conversation or narrative. That's all from us. Thank you for watching and listening our presentation. See you. Bye.